Welcome to the next podcast in Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie. Thank you for joining me today with this episode with Suzanne Jonker, who was the winner of the Dutch Hat Association competition in 2021. It had the theme of Waste Not, Want Not, and was supported by the Panama Hat Company, who provided straw seconds, which each entrant created their piece from as an exploration of sustainability. Suzanne joins us today to share about her winning piece. This podcast was possible thank you to the support of our podcast sponsors. These include Be Unique Millinery, House of Adorn, The Essential Hat, That Millinery, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, Marie D'Antoni Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, Milliner Australia, Best Western Apollo Bay Motel and Apartments, Judith M. Millinery Supply House. You can find a link to each of their businesses in our show notes, either through your podcast app or on our website. If you've been enjoying listening to this podcast series, I invite you to show your support through becoming a Patreon. You can do this by visiting www.patreon.com/Millinery.Info. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining me today on this Millinery.Info podcast. It's wonderful to be talking hats with you. Congratulations on your winning piece. You won the Dutch Hat competition this year. I'd love to hear a little bit about that piece.
About my winning piece, yes, absolutely. And first, well, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be invited. The piece I made for the competition, it was a little bit different the year I won, because normally you make a design and then you start thinking about what kind of materials you want to use. And this year you got a whole package with material because it was about sustainability. And the theme of the competition was Waste Not, Want Not. So we got a whole package with all kinds of scraps from the Panama Hat Company in England. Which was really nice because I never worked before with Panama straw. So that was the first time for me. So it was really like, okay, the material is the straw. What can I do with it? How do I have to work with it? And because it was about sustainability, I was really thinking about, I have to use a hat block I already have. And at that moment, I only owned 2 hat blocks. So the choice wasn't all that difficult. So I just started out actually with working with the material and the block I had, and I made 2 shapes out of it, 2 the same shapes actually, with all kinds of pieces. At first I started, the whole piece fell apart, so I had to go to plan B. And well, I made the shapes and started building with it, and well, I found the shape I finally ended up with actually. It's so that's how I started with making the hat. And then I had some scraps left from a few long pieces, and I wanted to do something with that, so I used it for the finishing, all the edges of the shapes. And it started out as all pieces connected with each other, and well, that's where I got the name from. The piece is called Connections, and at the time of COVID, that was pretty. It suited with the piece.
Very relevant.
So that's exactly. It was relevant at that point. So that's how I called it, Connections.
And it was a strange time to be taking part in a competition. What was it like creating and experiencing the competition during lockdown and COVID? How did that impact what happened?
How did it impact? Well, first of all, I had a lot of time. That was well because everything was in lockdown when I started with it. So my business was closed. I couldn't teach classes at that moment. So I did have some time to think about it, to experience with materials. And of course, it was a bit of a weird time for everybody, I think. It's still is sometimes. So mostly it was I had some time left to experience a little bit more with the material, to work with it, to try a few things. Yeah, pretty much that, I think.
And what was in the bundle of materials? You mentioned the competition was supported by Panama Hat Co. When you opened up the box or the package with the materials, what was in there?
I had one big piece, like a capeline. It was one big piece, was a little bit damaged here and there. For the rest, there were all kind of scraps, a few long pieces, which were from the brim. What else? There was one big black piece. So it was a neutral colors and black. So I was pretty lucky, I think, with the colors I got, to be honest. It was all black and natural, which matches really nicely together. So I didn't change any of the colors. I didn't have to add anything of, did I add anything to it? No, I didn't add any other materials. I'm looking at it right now, actually. No, I really only used the materials I got in the box. And well, like I said, I never worked with the material before, so that was a bit of a challenge. The first piece I got out of the box fell apart because it was really a little piece and it really frayed. So it's okay, that doesn't work. So at first I looked up on how to handle the material, experience a little bit with little pieces I didn't want to use, to make it wet, to make it pliable. Is that the right word for it?
Yeah.
So and from there it was pretty easy, actually, and I love the material. I started using the material more and more, actually, right now. So that was the fun part of it for me.
And you made an award-winning hat in the process.
Yeah, I never expected that, to be honest. It was the second time I entered in the competition, so it was quite a surprise for me.
And the hat got to go on display as well at a gallery, is that right?
Yeah, that was really fun, and it was really nice about the competition because everybody got the same box with material, the same kind of material with different colors, different pieces, but still the same kind of material. To see what everybody makes from the same material with so many different hats and hat pieces. I think that was really interesting to see, and it was wonderful. It was displayed at the gallery, so you could go there and see everything and touch everything if you wanted. So that was really nice.
Fantastic. And you've got a background in textile and fashion design, is that correct? What's your background?
Actually, my background is I started out as a jewelry maker. So I'm a goldsmith and always worked in the jewelry industry for nearly about 20 years, I think. But on the side, I've always been interested in fashion, in making my own clothes. And so at one point, I think about 25 years ago, I started to do a fashion education in my spare time. And this education was split up in parts. And one part of it was millinery. But by the time I came to the millinery part, I always found very interesting. We moved to the United States for a couple of years. So I've skipped my education at that point. And I think about 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, I was still interested in the millinery part. So I found a great milliner in Amsterdam and took classes with her. She's Marga van der Bos. I'm not sure if you know her. She's a great milliner, and she teach me all the techniques and gave me the confidence to go ahead with it, actually. So I'm still taking classes with her.
That's wonderful. And what were some of those first skills that drew you to millinery?
I think first was the working with felt, because when you start working with felt, it becomes so easy to shape it, and I love that about wool felt, that you at the moment you make it wet and steam, and it comes so almost like clay, that you can shape it in any shape you want it to. So I love that part about it. So first I worked a lot with felt. And then I started to do a little bit more with cinema and now with straw. And I'm still not there. There's so much to learn and so many techniques to learn about. So, and what part of the prize I won with competition is a 2-day class with Marianne Jonker, a well-known hat maker here in Holland. And she is very experienced in working with leather. So last week I had the first workshop with her and starting to work a little bit more with leather. So that's my next thing to explore, actually.
In the Netherlands, you wear hats very differently to what maybe an Australian or an American or the British wear. Do you wear hats yourself during the day, or what's your hat style?
What's my hat style? I love hats and I love wearing hats. And to be honest, a lot of times I just forget about it. So I have to learn to wear more hats, actually. I love felt hats, wool felt hats, especially in the wintertime. I'm trying to see what I have up there. But I'm still so much in exploring different shapes and different kinds of hats. And so I have to wear more hats, actually, myself.
We should all be wearing more hats. I think we're all a little bit guilty of that one.
So, and there is not a lot of hat wearing in Holland yet. I really hope that comes back a little bit more.
Yeah. And the piece you made for the competition is quite, I guess, special occasion wear. What other style of pieces have you been enjoying making?
All kinds of styles, actually. I made a big cinema hat for a lady who wore it on Parliament Day, which is one of the days in Holland that ladies wear a little bit more hats, of ladies in Parliament do. So I had the opportunity to make one for her, which was quite big and colorful. I love colorful hats. I love to make big wool felt hats, actually, also. So that's still trying to find my way a little bit in it to see what's my own signature in it.
You have a studio space behind you that I can see.
Yes,
can you tell us a little bit about your studio space? How is it set up and how do you work within the space?
Well, I have to, I'm lucky to have my studio space attached to my home, so it's very easy. It's like a little bit of like a classroom. I teach sewing classes up here to adults and children. So I got a lot of tables and a lot of sewing machines in here, about 6 machines. And in the corner of my space, there is a big table where I have all my hats and hat materials and where I make my hats. So I'm trying to find time during the week to do something with millinery. And so my main business is teaching sewing classes and all kinds of textile work. Yeah, like even children's birthday parties I do with some crafts, things making. So that's a little bit about my space, actually. It's not too big, but it can hold about 6 people for sewing classes and about 10 children for birthday parties.
Oh, what a fun space.
It is, actually. And I'm so lucky to have it next to my house also. So that's really easy. Love to be here.
Do you have a dedicated time in your week where you set aside some space for millinery, or it's just as you find time between the classes?
Yeah, it's more like to find time. I started out with I was thinking about every Friday afternoon I'm going to be busy with millinery, but it never worked that way. So it's more like between the hours of my classes, I can do a few things. So the sewing classes is not all day continuously. I have classes in the morning and mostly in the evening, some in the afternoon. So there are some hours in between I can use for making some stuff for myself. Mostly hats, actually. About that. So.
And when you're teaching, what are some of the main skills that you're passing on in terms of textile knowledge and what people are coming to learn?
Oh, it's very different what kind of people come. I do have ladies, mostly ladies, unfortunately. I love to have a few guys in there. Some of the ladies really never touch the sewing machine, so they really start from scrap, actually. And I do have ladies who know how to sew, actually, they're all their life already, but like to have one moment in a week, then they can go to class and still find some tips and tricks to do it a little bit more neat. Or and for some people, it's more like the social aspect of being in a class and being with other ladies.
Yeah. And do you make garments for yourself as well?
Oh yes, I do. I still make a lot of stuff myself. Yeah, a lot of clothes myself. But sometimes it's. I started out with making a lot of clothes for my kids also, but they pretty grown up now. They don't want me to anymore. They come to that age. But I still make a lot for myself also.
Fantastic. And do you think, how did the sewing skills and your textile knowledge transfer across to millinery? Did you find that there were things in common that came across quite naturally?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's already making patterns for hats or caps. It's much easier when you know already a little bit about pattern making and sewing on a sewing machine. Just having the skills to with thread and needle is already an advantage, I think.
Yeah. And what was the biggest difference that you found, or the biggest challenge taking on the new millinery materials?
I think the stiffness of materials. When you work with textile, it's most textile I work with is very thin and soft, and some of the millinery materials are more stiff, more coarse to work with. So you need more power. Like blocking like blocking wool felt. If it's a little bit stiff felt, it really needs a lot of power to make it a nice hat out of it.
And you mentioned there your block collection. How many? You said 2. Is that how many blocks do you have in your collection?
Right now I got 4, now 5. So it's not that much yet. Not that many. But I'm building on my block collection already.
And what were your first choices? So starting your block collection, what are the things you're looking for when you're choosing your blocks?
The first one was a very simple hat block, very I say that very smooth, hardly any shape in it, just to put my hats on and to make a basic shape. And then I got the one I made my winning hat piece on, which is a little bit of a different shape. And now I got one block for big brim, and the hat piece on it. How would you call that? It's a Borsellino hat piece of hats. Yeah.
And do you find it an exciting challenge, or creating shapes off those blocks? How do you approach that?
The shapes are pretty simple to make. I think I even enjoy it a little bit more to make my own shapes, to use a simple block and mold your own shapes in there. I love doing that, actually.
Yeah. And what exciting projects are you working on that you're looking forward to?
I'm trying to work a little bit more with leather. So right now I'm busy with a big brim made of wool felt, and then I'm going to cover it with leather. So that's one of the projects I'm working on right now. So I'm starting with a little shape, and now I'm going to the bigger shapes to see how that works.
Fantastic.
And how to get it really smooth. That's a challenge. I'm trying to get more advanced in trimming of hats. Trying to find, or actually, I'm trying to find more workshops on the internet. There are a lot lately on the internet. So to do some workshops in working with feathers or making flowers with leather or things like that. So I'm trying to get more advanced in techniques like that. And what I think is a challenge, I think in Australia that there are much more materials available for millinery than it is in Holland. I'm always trying to find materials, which sometimes it frustrates me. I can't get it up here. So I can get it in Australia, I can get it in the US, I can get it in the UK, but not in Holland. So that sometimes is a bit frustrating.
So where have you been sourcing most of your materials from?
There are a few, there are 2 or 3 in Holland and Belgium where you can get it. Of course, in the UK, there are a lot of businesses where you can get millinery materials. But now with the Brexit, it's made a little bit more difficult to get it in Holland because you have to pay taxes and all kind of fees to get it over it because it's not part of the European Union anymore. So that makes it all a little bit more difficult. So it's trying to find a lot of stuff.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, for talking hats with me today. It was wonderful to hear about your award-winning piece and your textile and jewelry making skills.
Thank you. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Millinery.Info with Suzanne. I'd like to thank our Patreon podcast sponsors, Be Unique Millinery, House of Adorn, The Essential Hat, That Millinery, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Hat Academy, Hats by Lico, Hat Mags, Marie D'Antoni Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, Best Western Apollo Bay Motel and Apartments, Millinery Australia, and Judith M. Millinery Supply House. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes, which you can find in your podcast app or through our website. We really appreciate their support. If you've been enjoying this podcast series, I'd like to invite you to become Patreon to show your support. If you head over to www.patreon, that's patreon.com/millinery.info, you can find out more about becoming a podcast sponsor or a supporter. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.